want to welcome all of you to WasteCap Nebraska's Public Policy Forum, which is part of our 2014 Sustainability Summit, The Road to Zero Waste. I'm Chris Funk. I'm the Director of Zero Waste Programs for WasteCap, and I will be the moderator tonight as we discuss policy initiatives that can really get us on the road to a zero waste society. For those of you, and I know many of you do know, but I know there are some who don't know a lot about WasteCap, and I can tell you that we've been around in some form for over 20 years. We were first a program of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce with some funding from the City of Lincoln and some other sources, and then our mission was to help businesses reduce their waste and improve their bottom line through education and waste assessments. And then in 2006, WasteCap of Lincoln became separately incorporated as WasteCap Nebraska, as a 501c3. It's an organization now that reaches out to both businesses and communities around the state to help them develop practices and policies that improve our environment through waste reduction and recycling. So we've grown a bit. We're really fortunate tonight to have just a great panel of people. We have people who are national experts on zero waste. We have people who have spent their entire careers working with recycling in Nebraska and around the country, and people who have vast experience in developing and shepherding public policy at both state and local levels. So we can't get much better than that. Now, the panel isn't up here because we have a video. Many of you have seen it, but it's worth repeating, I think, for those of you who are new tonight to the policy forum. This is a video. It's a 3-minute animated video produced, the creative work by the Minnow Project here in Lincoln and funded by the Nebraska Environmental Trust as part of our Zero Waste Community Roadmap project. And it's really hot off the press. We're just showing it at the summit for the first time. We showed it this morning at a workshop, and it will be available to anybody who wants to use it in their community, wherever. So with no further,
We live in a throwaway society where it's okay to dispose of perfectly good resources. How often do you use something once, throw it away, and buy another? Think about a trip to the grocery store. How much of what you buy ends up in your garbage? Plastic bags, plastic wrap, boxes, foam trays, paper, absorbent pads, tubs, containers, and more. Every year, Nebraskans throw out over $137 million worth of material that could be reused, recycled, or composted. Because of our advanced sanitation systems, throwing things away is easy. But what are the consequences for this convenience? Modern-day landfills are a necessity for a throwaway society, but they come with a heavy price tag. Landfills are extremely expensive to build, costly to monitor, and difficult to locate. Despite high-level engineering and numerous safeguards, landfills can also pose a serious threat to our environment and be harmful to human health. Decomposing garbage has already started contaminating our groundwater, while decomposing organic matter in landfills is one of the largest sources of man-made methane, a potent greenhouse gas that contributes to climate change. Bigger and better landfills are no longer the solution to support our throwaway society. The time has come to rethink how and what we waste. WasteCap Nebraska has a plan. Our Zero Waste program is a roadmap that transitions communities from a waste-dominated garbage system to a resource-rich recovery system. It is a long-term strategy based on the work of EcoCycle International. The plan uses policy changes, new programs, infrastructure, education, and community engagement to pave the way to waste reduction. Citizens, government, and businesses work together to develop new systems and infrastructure, such as pay-as-you-throw garbage collection, construction and demolition debris recovery, universal curbside recycling, and food scrap composting. These programs recover, recycle, compost, and repurpose resources in our garbage, preserving landfill space, creating jobs, and reducing the impact of waste on our environment. Zero waste strategies benefit the environment on a local, national, and global level. Many communities across the nation are adopting zero waste policies and are demonstrating that more than 70% of what we call garbage can be recovered and sold to make new products. Communities in Nebraska have started down the road to zero waste and are beginning to transition from a throwaway mindset to a resource recovery community. Isn't it time your community got on the road to zero waste? To learn more about the Zero Waste Community Roadmap, visit wastecapne.org/zero waste.
So I'm going to introduce this fabulous group of people. Directly to my left, Stephanie Barger. She comes to us from Southern California, although I learned at dinner tonight that she spent her early childhood in Omaha, so she's actually back in her home territory. She is the founder and executive director of the U.S. Zero Waste Business Council. Ms. Barger formed this business council in January of 2012, so not all that long ago, to meet the growing need for educational resources, peer-to-peer networking, and third-party certification for businesses across the nation. Stephanie brings over 25 years of experience in environmental stewardship, employee training, management consulting, and business relationship development. Because of her strong belief that zero waste systems and processes can help create a new economy where everyone wins, she developed and launched a business conference and training program called Zero In on Zero Waste. Don't let your bottom line go to waste. She has spent the last 15 years leading the Earth Resource Foundation, which runs a dynamic high school environmental leadership program, provides training for at-risk youth in zero waste and career development, and has developed a recycling, resource management, and zero waste certificate and associate degree programs at 3 community colleges in Southern California. She received her Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from San Diego State University. And Stephanie will be facilitating a workshop tomorrow that I encourage you to check out. It will be great. Dale Gubbles is the CEO of First Star Recycling, now in its 16th year. First Star is based in Omaha with a Lincoln operation and employs over 120 people. First Star has the most sophisticated mechanical recycling sorting system in the state and processes and markets over 100,000 tons of recyclables, I have a hard time with that, annually. Dale's lifelong career in recycling includes being the founder and executive director of the Nebraska State Recycling Association for 7.5 years, and service on the board of directors for the National Recycling Coalition for 10 years, with two terms as its president. After moving to Connecticut in 1989, he formed his own recycling consulting firm, working with businesses like IBM, Tetra Pak, Laidlaw, and several eastern state and local governments. In 1998, he returned to Nebraska to start First Star Fiber, which is now First Star Recycling. He was appointed in 2010 to the governing board of the Business Ethics Alliance of Greater Omaha, and he currently serves as the president of the Nebraska League of Conservation Voters, a nonpartisan political action group advocating for sensible environmental legislation and policies. Dale holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Ken Haar is somebody I know pretty well. For those of you who don't know, because people have been asking, yes, he and I are married, so you know, if the questions are easy to him, that's why, all right? He is a second-term Nebraska State Senator representing Legislative District 21 in Lincoln and Lancaster County and serves on the Education and the Natural Resources Committees. Ken is recognized for his commitment and advocacy for strong environmental policies. His legislative efforts include the Nebraska Net Metering Act, which allows small renewable generators to be connected to the power grid, and initiation of a comprehensive legislative study of wind energy integration and transmission. The study set the stage for legislation that encourages the development and export of Nebraska's vast wind resources by private developers. Ken's bill to require the Nebraska Climate and Assessment and Response Committee to expand their work to include long-term impacts of climate change in Nebraska led to this month's groundbreaking report from UNL on climate change and its impact on Nebraska. Ken also led the call for a special session of the legislature in 2011 to address the route of the Keystone XL pipeline. Prior to serving in the legislature, Ken was a computer systems analyst. He has been active in community affairs for over 20 years and was elected twice to the Lincoln City Council. Ken holds both a Bachelor of Science degree in Chemistry, Math, and Physics, and a Master of Science degree in Educational Administration from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Carrie Hackenkamp, my boss, is the executive, Ken's my boss at home, she's my boss at work, okay. Carrie is the executive director of WasteCap Nebraska and has been involved in recycling and environmental issues for 19 years. She has been the director of WasteCap since 1998 when it was a program of the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce. The focus of the program was to educate businesses on how to reduce their waste and improve their bottom line. Through Carrie's leadership, WasteCap of Lincoln expanded in 2006 to become its own separate 501c3 as WasteCap Nebraska, providing education, training, and services to businesses as well as communities throughout the state. WasteCap is now providing zero-waste community education and planning with support from the Nebraska Environmental Trust and has expanded its business training to include environmental stewardship programs like Good Company. Carrie is the former chairperson for NICE, which is the Nebraska Industrial Council on Environment, and has written 12 publications for business recycling. She's a graduate of the Institute for Conservation Leadership's Executive Director Training and has earned certificates in project management and leadership from the Nebraska Business Development Center. Carrie also holds a Bachelor of Arts in Environmental Studies with an emphasis in sociology from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Eric Lombardi, who is our keynote speaker tomorrow and facilitated our great workshop this morning. He is the Executive Director of EcoCycle International, a project of EcoCycle incorporated in Boulder, Colorado. Eric is a specialist in community recycling systems, social enterprise, and public-private project development. He ran EcoCycle for 24 years and built it into the largest zero-waste service organization in the United States, with a staff of 70 and processing of over 50,000 tons of diverse recycled materials a year. Eric is an authority on creating comprehensive community-based programs and is often a keynote speaker and consultant on the social and technical aspects of creating a zero-waste or darn near society. Eric was invited to the Clinton White House in 1998 as one of the top 100 U.S. recyclers. He co-founded and served as the board president of the National Grassroots Recycling Network and is the co-founder of the Global Zero Waste International Alliance based in Wales. He served from 1997 to 2004 on the National Recycling Coalition's policy work group and was an executive coalition board member from 91 to 95. He also co-founded the U.S. National Nonprofit Recyclers Council and received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Colorado Association for Recycling. Eric has an advanced degree from Washington University in Technology and Human Affairs and has been working at the interface of where society, technology, business come together to bring beneficial change to all the stakeholders. And Eric has been our consultant and mentor in our Zero Waste Community Roadmap project, and we're really lucky to have his support and expertise. Milo Mumgard is a senior policy aide for sustainability for Lincoln's Mayor Chris Beitler, and he is my former boss. So I got them all up here. I know. Milo brings over 20 years of public interest legal and policy experience to the mayor's Cleaner, Greener Lincoln, an initiative that has the goal of making Lincoln the green capital city of the Great Plains. Over the last few years, Milo was responsible for programming and directing the use of over $5.5 million in Federal Recovery Act funds. Through his leadership, Lincoln was able to upgrade thousands of local buildings, initiate new renewable energy efforts, develop new financing, and put into place sustainability policies for both the city and the community. He recently has been a contributor to a new solid waste management plan for Lincoln, components of which are still in process. In 1996, Milo founded Nebraska Appleseed, a nonprofit organization committed to justice and opportunity for all Nebraskans, and served as its executive director for 11 years. Appleseed addresses such complex issues as child welfare, immigration and communities, and health care. Following his work with Appleseed and prior to joining Mayor Beitler's office, Milo worked at the national level with both Common Cause and the AFL-CIO. Milo holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and his Juris Doctorate from New York University. So, welcome, panelists. Pretty good lineup. Okay, so now, you know, you've seen this video on zero waste, and I think you have a little bit of idea of kind of what we're talking about. We will start with the questions. And Dale is going to, the first question will be directed to Dale. Well, and secondly to Milo. So, in 1992, Nebraska mandated all municipalities to establish 20-year integrated solid waste management plans. Oh, I need to back up for a minute. I didn't say the rules. So, panelists have 2.5 minutes to answer the questions. And Alanka here is our keeper, and she has a yellow card will be held up when you've got 30 seconds left, and the red card when you're out of time, and you can just finish what you're saying. And then after those 2.5 minutes, other people on the panel can weigh in if you want. You can add something to it. You know, you got about a minute just to say something like, I agree, I don't agree, or here's something else. Something quick. Okay, so I'll back up here. In 1992, Nebraska mandated all municipalities to establish 20-year integrated solid waste management plans starting in 1994. These plans were to include landfill diversion goals that were to reach 50% by 2002. They only gave them like 8 years. Unfortunately, there were no reporting requirements, and so it's difficult to know how each community fared over the past 20 years. However, a recycling study just completed by UNL suggests that Nebraska overall may only have a recycling rate of 11.6%, but most of us think that is low because there were quite a few recyclers that didn't provide data. But even if they would have, we would be a very long way from 50%. We're not anywhere close to that. So Dale, you have been in the recycling business for 37 years. What are the problems recyclers face in increasing the amount of materials they collect, and are there state laws or municipal ordinances that could help the recycling industry and the state of Nebraska see significant gains in recycling?
Very definitely, there's a lot of things that the state could be doing to get us closer to those goals that were set back in 1992, and we barely scratched the surface of what could be done. And that is obviously something that's near and dear to everyone on this panel, and I'm sure near and dear to everyone in the office. But it also occurred to me that one of the things that we should be cognizant of in thinking about what they did in 1992 as to where we are today, actually one of the major problems that the state was trying to deal with in 1992 was closing well over 300, and I think I may be low, it's probably more like 500 open burning dumps that operated all across the state and had been for generations. That's how we dealt with trash back in my youth and through most of my career in recycling. And in fact, I left the state in 1988 after spending, as Chris said, about 7.5 years trying to lobby the unicameral every year to close those open burning dumps. And I think since they did it in 92 after I left, I must have been the impediment to keep it from passing. But regardless, I think that was the thing that was most on everyone's mind. How do we close those dumps? And they set a very high goal of 50%, but one of the things that they failed to do in that legislation, as far as I could tell, is really provide very many carrots and very few sticks as to how this is going to actually be achieved. So that, I think, is our challenge. How do we come up with the appropriate carrots and the appropriate sticks? Because we do have a rural population and challenges that other states don't have. But nevertheless, I have every confidence that Nebraskans can figure this out, because none of us is as smart as all of us.
Okay. Thank you. Milo, question for you. The city of Lincoln is one of a few cities that have revised their solid waste management plans. So these 20-year plans that all cities in Nebraska had to provide, very few have updated them as far as we can tell. But Lincoln has. So what diversion goals has Lincoln set, and what plans does Lincoln have to try and attain those goals?
Well, thank you. All right, here we go.
All right.
The City of Lincoln definitely dived in with both feet about 2 years ago to create a new solid waste management plan based upon a combination of factors, the leadership that the city has, as well as the leadership within the solid waste and public utilities, public works utilities that we have that wanted to move this agenda forward. Now, the ultimate product of the Solid Waste Management Advisory Committee and civic engagement and umpteen mind mixer, et cetera, exercises was to come up with a plan that is actually very, very progressive in many ways. And one of the things that it stated was we're going to set an overall waste reduction goal, and we're going to reduce the per capita rate of municipal solid waste disposed of in landfills, and it's going to be reduced by 10% in the next few years. It's going to be reduced another 10% and 15%, 20% beyond that. But what I really wanted to mention about the plan and where we are now is that I think we've come up with four basic, in fact, I'm convinced that we have four basic things to know from that process. One is, first of all, that the City of Lincoln and its leadership is committed to dealing with climate change impacts, and therefore this is one of those areas in which we need to be strongly acting to address our waste and our energy issues in that respect. And the community accepts that and is very supportive of that. But secondly, is that the city has also now reminded the community, or the community has been reminded, or the community is engaged in the realization that in Lincoln, which has 40-some independent haulers, indeed, solid waste is a utility and therefore a responsibility of the city of Lincoln. And so in the sense that whatever happens needs to be a function of the city working together with the community to come up with that, whatever regulation happens, is to ensure that that system that we have now works even better. And secondly, or thirdly, is that we now in Lincoln, I believe, as a function of this planning process, do believe that everything is a resource. That is, very little should be going to the landfill, if anything, over a long period of time, of course. But in the meantime, what can we do to ensure that the waste that is out there is in fact a resource, a primary waste cap kind of initiative? And lastly, is the realization we lag well behind the rest of the country. I mean, the facts of the matter are this. We think of ourselves as a progressive city, and we are in many respects, but in terms of our waste diversion and our recycling and our resource use, we are not doing as well as we should be in comparison to other cities and other states.
So I'm going to just take a follow-up to that. So would you say, Milo, that the specifics on some things are still in process of how policies that might develop that you're still working on?
There's a process going on right now that will actually produce a set of specific, I guess you could call it, ordinances that will be reviewed by the City Council and so on, but it basically would be putting life into what the Planning Committee put together. And the Planning Committee was really a great cross-section of the community. And a couple of those are going to be things you're going to hear a lot about, such as that universal curbside recycling requirements and things of that nature are definitely part of the agenda.
So our next question has to do with landfills, or a bit of them. They are the primary source of man-made methane, of which our video talked about, 72 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon within a 20-year period, and a real serious contributor to climate change. Excuse me. The culprit for this methane is organics that are decomposing without oxygen, and many cities around the country have started to collect and compost food. So this is for you, Eric. Your nonprofit, EcoCycle, collects and composts commercial food waste in Boulder. Do you have a public policy in Boulder that requires this? And what interest groups are there the primary movers and shakers for it, and are there people who are opposing it?
No, we don't have any government regulations or rules around composting in Boulder. EcoCycle started the first commercial composting program basically on our own nickel. We had a fleet of trucks. Honestly, we've been losing money for 6 years trying to get it off the ground. It's expensive to process and market, especially since we don't own the composting facility. We are in partnership with A1, a great company in Colorado, a great composting company. So no, there's no rules that make us compost. At the residential level, the city of Boulder did pass an ordinance saying if you're a trash hauler, that you must also collect recyclables and you must also collect organics, and you cannot charge separately. You must charge one bundled price, the hauler, because this is a free market. We have more than one hauler. Although we have one hauler who has 98% of the market. It's quite remarkable. But the city basically said, look, haulers, you're going to charge based upon unit pricing, and here's 2 formulas you can use, and you fill in the blank what number you're going to charge. But you've got to use one of these 2 formulas to charge the households to ensure unit-based pricing. And so we have a 3-bin system in Boulder now. And most people, you don't have to use it. It's universal. It's not mandatory. You know the difference there. Universal just means you have the bin. Mandatory means you have to use the bin. We're not mandatory. We just have the bins. Everybody has the bins. And we're getting some very high residential usage, much lower commercial. We don't have commercial universal. We're working on that now, trying to get bins at all the businesses. And in fact, we're probably going to bite the bullet, and we're going to probably make commercial recycling mandatory next year, the same way the state of California has done so. And we're talking about mandatory composting for grocery stores and restaurants. Not all businesses, just food-related businesses. So that's where we're at right now with the state of what we call the new rules. You know, it's kind of interesting because it doesn't cost a lot of money to create new rules, and it creates new business for our local haulers. And so there's just a little bit of political heat you have to put up with. But EcoCycle is the nonprofit community organization that organizes the community and educates the community around these issues. And so there is an opportunity to learn all about it and complain about it or support it. But in the end, the community is very much on board with zero waste. So a lot of things are getting passed these days.
That's good. Thank you. Question for Senator Har. You've been a leader on the subject of climate change. Carbon dioxide seems to get most of the attention in terms of greenhouse gases. How concerned do you think we should be about methane generated by landfills?
Okay. Well, one comment you hear very often when you talk about climate change is in India and China are generating all this CO2 and you know, it doesn't make any difference. The things we do here can't make a difference unless the whole world decides to make the same change. And that's just baloney. There are many things we can do at a local level. And for one thing, I think we as a country can set kind of a moral example to the rest of the world. That's one thing we can do as a country. But locally, there are quite a number of things. Statewide, for example, when you talk about climate change, there are really 2 things that are going to happen: mitigation and adaptation. We're going to have to adapt. The climate is changing, and we're going to see those changes, and we can't stop them even if we turned off all our lights right now. But in terms of mitigation, there are some things we can do, and methane is a good example of something that we can deal with locally. And communities are starting to do this in Nebraska with capturing the methane. The city of Lincoln, for example, runs all of its sewage through digesters. Those big egg-shaped things you see out on Cornhusker Highway are digesters. The methane is captured and it goes into, it's burned for electricity. And just to give you another kind of wild example, and this is a little off the topic, but not a lot. There's a pig farmer in Nebraska, Danny Cluthy. Danny's theme is there is no waste. So I like that as a beginning part. Danny runs all of the manure from his hogs into a pit that's covered, it's digested, and he captures the methane and he runs his diesel generator, which sells electricity back to the grid. Lately, he's learned how to compress that because methane is natural gas. He compresses it and runs his pickup on 80% methane and 20% diesel fuel, gets 70 miles per gallon. So one of the great resources, and this is the way I like to keep thinking, we're not just trying to deal with waste, we're dealing with resources here. One of the resources we have in Nebraska is manure. And we have lots of it, and we could be using it. Dave Dingman, who's sitting back here, is working commercially with people, including Dairyland, to use that resource that right now is also creating climate change if you don't use it.
Thank you. Waste from businesses make up over half of the waste in our landfills, and we've been hearing from panelists that there is a move afoot to start to mandate businesses to recycle. So Stephanie, this is a question for you. California has recently passed a law requiring businesses to recycle. How is this law being implemented and enforced? And what reactions are you seeing from the business communities, including the haulers?
So thank you, and thank all of you for attending tonight. I think it's important to give a little bit of background. Our new law, AB 341, which requires mandatory commercial recycling for businesses in multifamily, actually came out of our climate change law under Governor Schwarzenegger, AB 32. And it was because of concerned citizens like you that were able to make the connection between climate change and the benefits of going zero waste, that worked with the AB 32 committee to get commercial recycling as part of a solution to climate change. So that's the background on how this came about. And the business community, because zero waste is a hot thing, it's a popular topic, and it's the fastest growing movement with businesses right now on efficiency, being smart, saving money, and taking good care of your employees and your customers. So it really resonates, and it's perfect timing, especially with the recession. The businesses really looked at how they could, reduce their impact and save their resources. So AB 341, it requires businesses to get to 75%. It's really a policy. There isn't any enforcement behind it. We're working to strengthen that. But the great thing is, as a consultant or as a nonprofit, I just go out and say there's a law that requires you to recycle. And that's all I have to say, and they're like, oh, okay, what do we do? So there's a positive for that. I think the bigger impact has been on the haulers. The haulers have had to step it up because they need to meet these requirements, and there's more and more pressure from the business community that they want these services. They want recycling, they want source separation, they want food scrap composting, and they want opportunities even for reuse. And so the haulers have totally had to shift their business plan, which is great for everyone. And I also want to let you know that we also had 2 other laws passed this year. One is banning organics for landfill. Which is amazing because people would separate out their green waste and then they would take the green waste and put it back on the landfill for daily coverage. So it was a total greenwashing. The businesses thought, and residents thought they were doing the right thing. So that's been banned, and then commercial organics composting is another mandate. So everybody's very supportive, and just quickly, zero waste businesses do not have to worry about AB 341 because they're at 90%, so they've already surpassed the state goal of 75%.
Thank you. Carrie, this question's for you. WasteCap has worked extensively with Lincoln area businesses for years. What do you think about the number of businesses that are recycling, and do you think that either a state or municipal recycling mandate would be a good idea for Lincoln or any other community in Nebraska?
I have to be careful how I answer that. You know, what I have found in the 16 years that I've been working with businesses is that they really do want to do the right thing. You know, it's a matter of economics and making sure that it's not going to cost them a lot more, either in labor or in time or in money. You know, for some businesses, there is no money to be made in recycling. You know, there's small enough businesses that it's an extra cost to have an extra subscription. But they do want to do the right thing. And the one thing that we know is that businesses pay for about 40% more service than what they use. So I've always told businesses, look, you can save money by just looking at your garbage contract and adjusting how many days a week you're being picked up or what size of a container you have. So we really try to show businesses, since we are in a voluntary system, how it benefits them. And once they can see those economics, then they're a lot more on board. I know that here in Nebraska, those types of mandates are not very popular. And I'm not sure how far they would go for us. But, you know, I think that having some landfill bans that don't necessarily require the recycling to happen but don't allow it to go to our landfills might be a better option to get more broad support for business recycling.
And panelists, remember you can comment on what your colleagues are saying. Eric? Yeah, Eric, I thought you might.
To follow up on what Carrie was just saying, there's also two very powerful non-financial benefits to a business to start recycling, no matter what size they are. And I've had CEOs tell me this. Number one is employee morale and employee retention, especially in the high-tech industry. In Boulder, we have a lot of companies who the young people are very talented, and you're not interviewing them for a job, they're interviewing you for a job. And if you don't have recycling, you're not going to get them. And I've had a CEO tell me that. So there's non-financial benefits to recycling as well that are hard to capture. I just wanted to add.
And just a quick follow-up on that, actually, we did a Green Team Roundtable in Norfolk, and the president of the chamber there was telling us a story about how they were bidding on a business to bring to Norfolk. And that company had gone to our state office building, and because our state office building did not have recycling, we did not get the bid for that company to come to Nebraska, because they followed up and they found out why. They were one of the leaders in coming to Norfolk to place their business, and the folks at the state followed up on it, and they said, you know, we told you we're a green business. And we went to your state office building and couldn't even find a recycling bin. So it matters, and the economics are there, especially when you start losing business to other states and losing jobs to other states because you're not behaving in that manner.
I can see there's other panelists who want to speak. Go ahead.
And I'll make this quick. So the difference between a recycling program or zero waste is in a zero waste, you're not just shifting your trash from the trash bin to the recycling bin, but you're looking at redesigning, rethinking, retraining, reducing, reusing, repairing, and refusing. So you actually eliminate overall your trash and your recycling. And, you know, that's where even a small business can have a huge financial impact when they look holistically at their business and go through all the R's with zero waste. And that's where there's significant savings. And that's where we need to jump to, from recycling to zero waste and take in all the R's.
Also, you know, the question was put to me, what was left out of the law back in 1992 that should have been in there? And Ken's comment about the pig farmer reminded me that I had a board member at the time who made a very cogent argument that if we were going to ever become a sustainable state, and this was back in the 80s, remember before the word sustainability was the catchword that all of us have heard umpteen times of late. His point was we shouldn't worry about recycling as much as we should worry about the fact that we have farmland that is dying because we do not replenish it with the organics that we're putting in our landfills. So if there was anything that was left out of that bill in 1992, it was the recognition that this state's livelihood depends on having healthy soil. And our tour this afternoon to Prairieland was a perfect example of that. You know, we should be taking every single piece of organics that we have in all of our landfills across the state and making sure that they're getting out to farmers in some way so that our land is sustainable. We do that, and this was, again, my former director's opinion. If you pull out the organics, everything else that is left will be a lot easier for us to recycle.
When I hear about recycling and landfills and so on, there's so many parallels to green energy. And, you know, in this state, we've lost a number of businesses who wanted green energy, and they look at us and they say, no, you're really not promoting green energy. And so I think the kind of stories you tell, Carrie, are really important because lawmakers often listen, especially if you're losing business, and those stories are important. The same is true of just about everything green today, and I think we have to concentrate on that.
Okay, thanks. Good comments and good follow-up. Pay-as-you-throw is a policy that we've been talking a lot about, certainly within the Zero Waste Community Roadmap. Spoke about it a lot today at our workshop. It's a policy where households pay for their garbage service based on the amount of materials they send to the landfill. It really treats garbage like a utility, which is what I think Milo was talking about. It's like electricity or gas or water. You pay for what you use. But you know, with garbage, you don't typically. You just, you know, somebody next door has 3 garbage bins. They're going to pay the same that you do if you just have a small amount. So it's been proven that unit-based pricing is really the best incentive for household recyclers. And so this is a question back to you, Milo. Do you think Lincoln will embrace pay-as-you-throw at some point in this, or what will it take in this current planning process that's going on?
The short answer is absolutely yes, at some point. I believe that the community as a whole, I think the exercise we've gone through the last couple of years and where we are now politically in the city, you folks in this room, us folks in this room, are really the vanguard, for lack of a better term, to what is actually a mainstream reality out there in the community. We're ready for the kinds of things that folks here are talking about. So therefore, a pay-as-you-throw kind of approach, a volume-based approach, well, yes, we'd be ready for that at a certain point as we phase in some of the additional efforts that we have in mind. For example, if we go to require the curbside recycling services, there's going to be lots and lots of new collaborations that are going to be developed among our private haulers. There's going to be a lot of new economic opportunities for folks. There's going to be new opportunities to create new services that presently do not exist in the City of Lincoln system. And that over time, as we continue to work with the community and educate the community and do more and more work to ensure that people understand the value of what's going on and how, in fact, what they're doing is producing some very, very strong results in the community as well as elsewhere, that this is, you know, it's all upside. There is no downside to moving in that direction as far as I'm concerned. So when we get to a pay-as-you-throw situation, that just simply becomes in the mindset of the consumer just the way in which they can economically figure out the best way to deal with their waste, which in this instance would be recycling, compost, and so on and so forth, which is exactly the direction we want them to go. From the hauler's perspective and the private industry perspective, they will be, of course, adapting to that new reality and coming up with business plans and how to deal with that and how to. We still have to haul waste, whether it's in the, whether it's considered to be waste of the landfill or a resource. So in that light, I'm very enthusiastic about the possibilities in terms of public policy because the community as a whole is ready for these kinds of things. People oftentimes say to me, well, if that were the case, then why do we, for example, only have a certain relatively low level of curbside recycling services that are subscribed to now. And the simple answer to that is, shoot, that requires people to actually spend some money to do something that otherwise they have to take an affirmative step to do, whereas we could set public policy that gets them in the mood, so to speak, and works with the haulers and otherwise to make it so that it's part of the package. And will that increase the cost? Well, I'm one of the people that consistently talks about that won't increase the overall cost of the consumer base. But be that as it may, there's a lot of issues to talk about, but the end result is that the community and the voters out there, frankly, are ready for some of this kind of change.
If municipalities, find it too difficult to take up the challenge of passing pay-as-you-throw, and I know that there are many communities who this isn't the top thing on their list, but yet we're seeing it as a major incentive for recycling. Do you think the state of Nebraska should help them out by mandating cities to develop unit-based pricing?
There. Well, at every level of government where you are mandating to lower levels, I think the call at those officials at those lower levels are always, we don't want no mandates. We don't want no mandates, unless you give us the money to go along with it. Yeah, we don't want no stinking mandates. So I think in this area, probably a mandate, I'd even be willing to say it's probably a good idea, but I don't think it would have any chance in the Nebraska legislature, unfortunately. I think what we need to do is look for incentives. And just a little background information here. Some time ago, not only were there burning garbage dumps, but there were also leaking gas tanks at filling stations and stuff. And the state established the Lust Fund, the leaking underground storage tank fund. Okay, and money has gone into that to clean up leaks when there are leaking gas tanks. Well, maybe there should be that same sort of fund for leaking landfills. And I was just trying to think about this. Maybe there's an incentive that you could give if a community was really serious about keeping stuff out of landfills. Maybe their incentive could be a lower rate for paying into that kind of fund. So I just think in this case, we need to look for incentives, and that's where you all come in. Just another comment here. The best ideas come from people with those concerns. I mean, so many people just look to the legislature or the Congress or whatever, or the city council, and they expect those elected officials who may or may not be leaders to lead and solve their problems, but it doesn't work that way. Problems really get solved when a group like this does their homework, generates the interest, and the pressure comes from the bottom. Eventually, elected officials listen, and they're much more apt to listen if there's that grassroots pressure.
Eric, you wanted to comment on that?
Yeah, following up on this thought about unit-based pricing, there's a basic fairness issue at work here that no one's talking about. If you are making the effort to help your community and protect the environment by recycling, and you're putting out a very small amount of trash every week, and your neighbor is not paying any attention and filling 3 trash cans full of stuff that goes to the landfill, you're both having a different impact on the community, and you're both paying the same amount. So there's basically an inequity here, an unfairness for the person that's trying to do something good for their environment. So I think Americans are very open to the idea of fairness. The other thing is the US EPA is founded upon a principle called polluter pays. And if you accept the premise that landfilling is a polluting activity through pollution of the groundwater and pollution of the air emissions, and thus, who's paying for that? Well, the person who uses more landfilling services should be paying more for the pollution they're creating. So again, polluter pays and basic fairness dictates that you can't charge one fee no matter how much trash you generate. That's not accurate or fair. And so there has to be a discussion around how to spread the costs more fairly. And I don't know if it's pay as you throw. Of course I know it is. 7,000 communities are doing it. 7,000 communities are doing it. You have a state law that prevents it, from what I understand. That's ridiculous. I've never heard that. Is that true?
Just in Omaha.
Oh,
In
it's
Omaha.
Omaha. Okay. So you've got...
It's a state law that covers
state law?
municipalities.
Okay. Crazy. I never heard of such a thing. Where did that come from? You know, where did that come from? Really, that's crazy. I've never heard of it.
Crazy. Well, pardon? Okay, thank you for that. Well, we were kind of getting close on time. Or do you have a quick?
I do, but I never talk in just 10 seconds. It occurred to me while we were talking about on this topic of who should mandate. I think a great potential for mandates is kids writing their parents. There's a video taken in the Omaha Public Schools in the elementary school where the kids all do composting and garbage and stuff. And they're so proud of that, and I can't believe that when they get home, they don't say to their parents, why are you throwing that away? I think adults are much more willing to take mandates from their kids than they are from the government. And maybe that should be a lesson for us.
Yeah, a campaign. All right, we'll get those kids weighing in. Okay, the next question is really about sort of the issue of the privatization that we have, and I think around the country, of portions of our waste management system. That recycling study that was just completed by UNL, they were not able to get data from almost half of the recyclers on on the volume they recycled. They got comments from them, but they wouldn't share their volume, which means we couldn't really project our recycling rate. And the reason they wouldn't do it is they said it was proprietary information. So this is both to Stephanie and Eric. This surely is not a problem just for Nebraska, and I want to know, how are other states dealing with this issue of proprietary data and then being able to get the information the states need to know what our rate is, because we can't manage what we don't measure. Stephanie, do you want to speak to that? Eric, you got the mic? Whichever. Okay, go ahead.
We ran into this situation in Colorado about 15 years ago or so. And the way we solved it was that we brought in a law firm. They were a third-party law firm. And all the data went to that law firm. And the law firm crunched the numbers, came up with the aggregate, and released the aggregate number to the governor's office. And no one outside that law firm knows any of that data, and we never will. So that's how we learned what the number was, the aggregate number. We don't need to know the details about each company. We just need to know how much newspaper was recycled, in the state. How are we doing? Or the county. So that's how we handled it, was we brought in an impartial third-party law firm who had control and ownership of the data. It's pretty simple.
Yeah. Okay,
and
good.
it wasn't expensive. This is
a good
not
idea.
expensive. This is just a little arithmetic. Yeah. They received reports in the mail. They did their arithmetic. They filled out a form that the government said, okay, give us the aggregate numbers for these. It was not expensive, and it was not difficult.
Great. Anything to add to that? Stephanie, do you have other?
Well, that's enough said, but I'll just give you how we're handling it in California. So first, AB 939, which went through in the 90s, which required cities to recycle 50%. That's how not to do it, because the numbers are all over the place. In my city, in Newport Beach, they're supposedly recycling 75%, yet we just got recycling bins at our house this spring. So we didn't even have recycling at the homes. We still don't have green waste at our homes. In the businesses, most of them don't recycle. So, that's very telling. But what happened in LA is environmentalists, public health, and social rights groups came together because there was so much bad business going on in LA. Everything from what was happening to the workers at the dirty MRFs to polluting trucks to customers being overcharged. And so they put together this coalition called Don't Waste LA and came up and went out and did private interviews, interviews workers at the different sites and did their own surveys and came up with a report and worked closely with the mayor's office, and we actually pushed through a new RFP for commercial recycling that's basically a zero waste policy, and we're creating waste sheds because we have 150 individual haulers in the city of LA, and so that's being pushed through right now, and it's basically a competition to see which haulers can be the best zero waste haulers with training programs, worker environments, and clean trucks and clean routes.
Okay, thanks. Milo wants to, let Milo and then Dale.
I just wanted to jump in. In Lincoln, that's going to be an absolute necessity. How can you have a consumer base that really understands what's going on and how it's going on unless there is accountability and ultimately transparency in what is ultimately a utility responsibility of the city of Lincoln? It happens to be a privatized operation, but it's still a civic responsibility. So having regular reporting and regular accountability for what is going on with our waste stream is an absolute must in Lincoln, and that's what's going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean that folks are going to see all their proprietary information on the front page of the newspaper. It simply means that's going to happen, that there's going to be that level of reporting.
Okay, thanks. Dale?
Speaking as one of the recycling companies that actually submitted the data, I obviously can't speak for those who didn't. But I think it does speak to what is a bigger issue, and Eric, you mentioned this today earlier in the workshop. I think the more appropriate question that we Nebraskans need to ask and get a survey and make state law, how much does it cost every community in this state to deal with their solid waste? You know, that number is one that, and you summed it up very well, Eric, when you said, it's damn impossible to get it, and that is so true. So yeah, I'd like to know how much is recycled of plastics and so forth, and it's more as a marketing tool than anything, because if we're going to attract businesses to the state to use our material, we need to know those numbers. But if our communities are unwilling to even look at the question, how much does it cost you as a resident, as a citizen of this state, to bury your stuff? And I'm not talking about just putting it in the landfill. I'm talking about the transportation from your transfer station there. I'm talking about all the hidden costs of your landfill. If we don't know that, why would we care? Because it's the most important question that we need to get answers to.
States are passing laws to require manufacturers to have responsibility for recycling or paying for the take-back of their products. Nebraska passed a law requiring electronic manufacturers to take responsibility for that, but Governor Heineman vetoed it. Later, Senator Harr introduced a similar bill, but the National Consumer Electronics Association came out strongly against it, saying they couldn't deal with so many separate state laws, and offered to work on a voluntary program. So Carrie, this question's for you. How important do you think extended producer responsibility laws are to the overall mission of waste diversion?
I do think it's very important. We've been working on a product stewardship initiative for a number of years here in Nebraska that's been funded by the Department of Environmental Quality through grant funding. And, you know, extended producer responsibility shifts that responsibility from taxpayers and governments to the folks who are involved in the manufacture, the distribution, and the use of products. So nowhere in that equation of three different people are the governments who are having to manage these either hazardous materials or hard to recycle materials. So it's keeping those materials out of the landfills. And, you know, when we talk about extended producer responsibility or product stewardship initiatives, we're looking at products like electronics and batteries and mercury thermostats and fluorescent lighting, carpet. We're looking at product packaging now. And so what it does is it encourages those manufacturers to reduce the amount of waste that they're putting into their product, or to design the products that they're making for reusability, for recycling, so that they can be recovered. They're designing things for longevity versus 1 or 2 years of a product's life. They're making replacement parts for those materials that they're making. And it removes that cost from the local government. It becomes a shared cost of the manufacturer, the consumer, and the retailer. And it allows for that resource recovery, and it helps us to save money from having to manage those materials. We spend thousands and thousands and thousands, and Catherine, you can probably tell us what we're spending on household hazardous waste collections every year. You know, because we're not managing those materials in a better manner through product stewardship initiatives. So I do think it makes a huge difference in our waste diversion.
Okay, so. Oh, good.
We have one in North Platte, we're getting one in Kearney, slowly but surely. We are getting them here in the state.
That's good. Stephanie, how do, what, I'm sorry, what? Okay.
A quick follow-up on this household hazardous waste thing, because I'm on this fairness kick. I don't buy toxic items from the hardware store anymore. I have found that there are non-toxic alternatives to everything, okay? So how come I'm paying for the household hazardous waste cleanup for my neighbor that's not paying attention and keeps buying the toxics? Well, most household hazardous waste collection programs are. Okay, so I don't know how yours is being funded. How's it being funded?
On our website, you can look it up on the website. It's actually by manufacturers and wholesalers whose products have potential to cause litter.
Litter. Well, congratulations, because I was going to give a plug for EPR for hazardous items, because I think what we need to do is producers need to put a nickel or a quarter or 50 cents on the hazardous materials to pay for the end-of-life management of the things, so that when you buy it, you pay that 50 cents. Then I don't have to pay that 50 cents because I'm not buying it.
Right, a lot of the stuff that's coming out of when somebody goes in and cleans out, like their grandfather, their father passed, and they're going in and cleaning out the barn.
Right.
And finding
Oh, yeah. Legacy waste, we all know that. But I'm interested in the people who are not paying attention versus the ones that are. This is a fairness issue. So that's very interesting what you just said, because every household hazardous waste program in Colorado basically is paid for by the general taxpayer. Not Nebraska. Bravo.
That's good news, and I'm glad to hear that too, and we'll make sure people know about that. Another question on this vein is to Stephanie about how. Oh, yeah, you need to get the microphone. Okay. Da, 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 da.
These microphones.
I know. There, that one works. Yeah, right. We'll recycle them after we throw. Okay, so Stephanie, how does the U.S. Zero Waste Business Council see these extended producer responsibility laws? And what connection do you have with businesses that agree that they should have responsibility for the end life of their products and are willing to support that?
So producer responsibility is part of zero waste because it's all about closing the loop. So if you're producing a product, it needs to be recyclable, compostable, returnable, repairable, reusable. Otherwise, it's not part of the zero waste economy. So that's what's critical, and most of our businesses are going through that. In fact, Toyota, they have, because part of it is the dismantling of the product, so you can take out their entire electrical system with 13 clips. So you take it out and you can pull out the whole electrical system in one piece, which makes it very easy to recycle. Hewlett-Packard also has amazing programs with their computers. They've had a take-back program forever. What I think the gap is government officials or people developing these laws aren't talking to the businesses. And so there's a lot of frustration. Businesses want to do the right thing, but there's these patchworks, which I think you mentioned, of laws across the country. And so they're having to develop different policies in every single city and state. And it's very, very frustrating when most of them have incredible programs going on. And they're really going to the next level. Hewlett-Packard is now putting clips on their circuit boards instead of gluing the circuit boards together, so they're much easier to take apart. Also, when these laws are put in place, you have to make sure the infrastructure exists. We put through a carpet mandatory ban on carpets from landfills. Great program, but the infrastructure didn't exist. All these carpet recycling companies started up, and because they weren't getting the carpet to their facilities, they went out of business. So, but on the other end, we did a litter law with the plastics, and money went to, there was a grant fund set up for plastic processors that were willing to take post-consumer plastic and make it into new products. So we have this amazing company, these young guys under 30, they had 5 to 10 employees at their company, and they now have 150 employees because of these no-interest loans that were given out by Cal Recycle. So we just really need to bring everybody together and work together to develop a system, and the infrastructure really has to be in place. And I want to just say a quick thing about hazardous waste, and I know I'm over my time, but this is what's really weird. Our Attorney General, I guess, needed more money, so he went after all the grocery stores, and the grocery stores are being sued left and right to the tune of millions of dollars for their hazardous waste, because I don't know if you knew, but toothpaste is a hazardous waste when it expires, which is totally horrific if we're putting that in our children's mouth and it's considered a hazardous waste. And, you know, once again, that's just crazy. And Albertsons, who the Attorney General said had the best hazardous waste management program, was still fined $3 million. So once again, there's a lot of disparity, non-communication, non-collaboration. I think that's what's going to make these programs work, is to get the people in the room.
Thank you. Well, we have actually run out of time for the questions. We had one more, and I was going to give all of you panelists 2 to 3 minutes, but I think it's taken up while you've been talking, which has been great. And I want now to give the audience a chance to ask questions if you want to. Does anybody have any questions they've written down that they'd like me to read? There. And then also we have a microphone that can be, Alanka, you want to grab the mic? And, bring the questions, and then if there are people who want to speak to the microphone too. Okay, good. Many good questions. 3 of them here. So this is a pragmatic question. Where does source reduction fit in the waste management scheme? How does it happen? Respectfully recycling is still waste diversion. Who wants to take that on?
Well, that's our entire focus, is the upstream R's. We're not really into that diversion. In fact, in our scorecard, the 86 points that a company can get in their zero waste certification, only 4 of them are from diversion. And it's not only because it's important, but it's where the big money's saved. Toyota saved $1 million recycling cardboard boxes. They went to reusable shipping containers and saved $13 million. So the farther upstream you go, the more money and the more efficient your company becomes.
And I agree completely, because obviously source reduction is something that most businesses want to do naturally because it saves them money. As a policy issue, I think one of the things that the state, and maybe it does have to be national, but we could look at our depreciation laws as a way to bring about greater source reduction. You know, if you're going to have a new manufacturing line that will allow you to lower the amount of material that you have to put in a package, increase the opportunity for that company to write it off as depreciation, to encourage those types of thinking, because that's what we're talking about here, rethinking how we go about doing a lot of things.
Eric?
I think reduction is you know, it's holy ground, but it's one of the most difficult things to do and measure. Stephanie's talking about big corporations, and it's good to keep your eye on them because they're a closed system and they're run by dictators. So when the boss says do something, everyone does it. You know, our communities and our smaller businesses, we're open systems and we're run democratically. So it's a very different dynamic in our homes and our small businesses on how to reduce. I think good business people don't make waste on purpose. They know waste is money. So most good business people are already on it as best as they can be. I think in the home, one of the most powerful things you can do is this unit-based pricing thing. Because if someone's buying the smallest trash can, then when they're at the grocery store, they're actually kind of looking at some of the packaging they're bringing home. And they buy more bulk because they know they only have a little trash can at home to fill up. So that's one actual thing we can measure. And 60% of Boulderites now use the smallest trash can. And you know that they had to pay attention to their shopping habits to be able to live within one 32-gallon unit of trash. Other than that, I think it's a really tough nut to get around. In Europe, the packaging industry themselves created a tariff on packaging. The hard to recycle and wasteful packaging has to pay a greater tariff than the lightweighted, easy to recycle package. And industry did that themselves, the Green Dot program in Germany. They policed themselves on that. So industry source reduced themselves with a financial carrot and stick. So I think there's a lot of creative thinking and actual implementation work that needs to be done in this culture. We're nowhere near where we need to be on source reduction.
I guess this would be source reduction. UNL did something which was so simple and so effective. They stopped putting trays in the cafeteria. And so students, you know, at the all-you-can-eat buffets that you have at universities had to carry plates full of food to their tables, and it cut the amount of food waste. They didn't have to wash trays anymore, so there was savings in water and soap and food. And this is the kind of creative thinking that we need to be doing.
Okay. Another question. Historically, many of our waste management programs are funded on the basis of waste generation. What is the future, and I assume that means tipping fees at landfills. What is the future for funding these programs if fees are decreasing? I assume if we're decreasing the amount, if the tipping fees stay the same and we reduce what we put in.
So if I understand the question, it's how are we going to pay for landfills? Is that?
I think
if our tonnages are going down. Mm-hmm. Well, I believe the utility industry, like power lines, you know, you've got sunk costs. No pun intended with landfills, but there are sunk costs that have to be covered, and you know it may end up becoming more of the general fund. It has to come out of that portion. But I think if we get to the point where we have to worry about how we're paying for our landfills, we can all pat ourselves on the back because we have created jobs, we've saved a lot of energy, and maybe we restored the soil for Nebraska. So.
I think as I read this again, that probably some of like DEQ's programs are paid for by tipping fees. Is that right? We've got DEQ people sitting here. No? No. Aren't there any fees that are paid for from the, now someone else is, who I know is. $1.25 a ton at the landfill goes to the DEQ. Okay. And,
$1.25 from manufacturers of
waste reduction fund.
But for the waste reduction grant.
The tipping fee goes to the DEQ for the landfill.
So if somebody have a, Milo, are you wanting to speak to that?
Well, I just want to, not specifically to that point, but the general point, which is a very good point, which is how do we over time consider the sunk costs that Dale just talked about, and how do we avoid costs down the road now? In other words, everything we're doing now is to ultimately avoid those costs down the road, not to think about, gee whiz, how do we reduce what we're doing now and therefore pay for the same things down the road? We're not going to be paying for the same things down the road. Simple as that. We won't have to have a landfill that will be operated by, you know, this or that. It'll have to be just operated by this, and so on and so forth. So therefore, the real key is what do we do now in terms of financing and funding things to do things now to reduce our costs later, avoid the costs later. Very similarly to what LES does with respect to its sustainable energy program, we spend money now to avoid paying money later for larger energy needs and possibly a new coal plant, which no one wants, et cetera, et cetera.
Ken and then Eric.
Yeah, real quickly, I mean, a more general question, for example, right now we pay for roads with, a lot of the roads come from tax on gasoline. So now if you have electric cars that don't use gasoline, how do you pay for the roads? And so it's a bigger general question we're going to have to face. And in some countries now in Europe, they're working with electric cars. It's the miles driven that you pay for, not the gas tax. And so it almost sounds like pay as you go. and so this maybe has a lot broader implications than just garbage.
So the way I heard the question was, it's the classic death spiral, because we've been taxing the bad to pay for the good. We've been taxing landfills to pay for all of our creative programming the last 20, 30 years. So as we win, as we landfill less, we have less money available to support all the great diversion programs we've created. So I think California's actually done as much as anybody on it, and I'm not an expert in how California is dealing with the death spiral, but I know that this is a real issue. When you're counting on the landfill to pay for all your good programs and the amount you're landfilling keeps dropping, you got a budgetary crunch coming. So that's how I heard the question. It's considered the death spiral, and it's a very active conversation in the industry right now, and there's no clean answer unless Stephanie knows from California what they're doing.
No, and we're having, like, during the recession, the Glendale landfill, their trash went down so much, and yet they still had all the green waste, that they had way too much green waste in their landfill, and it was messing up all kinds of things. Yet at the same time, we can have taken all that green waste and put anaerobic digesters and created more electricity and created more income in a positive way from the landfill. So once again, being creative, and I think going back to the question that was asked earlier, what is the true cost of taking all this trash to the landfill? All the wear and tear on our roads from all those trash trucks, all the pollution, all the litter that blows out of the trash trucks, all the litter from all the hard to recycle and all the plastics. If we're doing source reduction, EPR, all of those programs, we truly reduce all of those costs. Orange County spends $350,000 a month on litter pickup. And that's why we're banning plastic bags, we're banning styrofoam, we have smoke-free beaches, all of that because of the huge amount of costs. And that doesn't include, I mean, there's a beach cleanup going on every single day, basically, that's all volunteer-driven. And I think we really got to get a handle on what does not only solid waste, medical waste, hazardous waste, what does all that waste cost us? The internal, external, the hidden, and the very obvious costs to our system. We haven't even brought in the health issues from all these toxic materials. So if we're able to reduce our health care because we're reducing all these toxic materials, that's a savings that, you know, to the government that can offset whatever, you know, with the landfill. So I think we need to do a comprehensive cost study, and a lot of these are going on through the jobs analysis.
Are there any other questions from the audience that people want to just ask directly? Okay, I will finish with, it's a pretty big question, but we won't go long into it. It is about what you're talking about, Stephanie, and the health aspects of landfills, specifically groundwater. When the Subtitle D landfills regulations were put in place back in '92, they're far better than engineered than our dumps. Everybody knows that. But at the time, they said the EPA said there would be leaks eventually. And since then, one of the engineers that consulted with the EPA, a guy named G. Fred Lee, has written extensively warning people that these regulations, the technology is flawed, and we need to do something about it. Eric or anyone on the panel, any of you know about, have some comments about this? There's really not much in the talk among the environmental community about it, and I'm wondering what you know.
Well, the issue of post-1991 landfills, because before 91 there was no requirement that they had to have liners or retain the leachate. So post-1991 Subtitle D landfill, we don't know what's happening. And that's what that engineer Lee showed, and a lot of other people have shown, is that underneath a 200-acre landfill, you've got seams. If you get a leak somewhere, a pinhole leak or a small rip in the liner, and you get a leak, it could go into a geophysical crack and escape. And you don't have perfect monitoring around a landfill. You have monitors every, I don't know, landfill expert could tell us, but it's probably every 30 feet at the most around a landfill, monitoring the groundwater. And Lee and others have demonstrated it's very easy to get an earth fissure between the measurements. And your leak is now just going out and escaping, but no one knows it. So that's the key issue with landfill security. We don't know. We have never gone back and excavated a landfill to see if it leaked. We don't know. I know my landfill in Boulder was shut down because it contaminated the drinking supply of Broomfield 15 miles away. But no one could find the plume. You can't find these plumes underground. There's no x-ray that shows you where it's going. So my landfill's closed. It's cost $11 million to clean up, and now we have to forever pay for a 160-acre cap to never let rain get in the landfill ever again in perpetuity. City of Boulder, taxpayers have to pay that. So how much does forever cost per ton? No one knows. So that's the problem with landfill security. We don't know. We have the landfill industry telling us they're not going to leak. We have memos from the EPA telling us every landfill will leak someday. Well, of course they will. It might be 50 or 100 years, but those liners are going to last forever. Rodents are going to come through the liner. That groundwater is going to get polluted someday by the leachate. So that's the problem with landfills. So we need to do everything we can to reduce the buildup of leachate. And who's going to monitor these things? The law says a landfill owner has to monitor the landfill for 30 years after closure. In Europe, it's a lot longer than 30 years. And there's actually an EPA memo from the late 1980s that actually had another 0 from the EPA staff that it said it should be a 300-year post-closure monitoring. That 0 dropped when it went into law. So who's going to monitor these things 50 years after they close? Nobody. So don't tell me it's not going to leak, because no one's watching and no one knows. And so in the face of this, if you've heard of the precautionary principle, which means the preponderance of scientific evidence tells you you're probably going to have a problem, then rational action is to move the other direction. Europe actually makes public policy based on precautionary principle now. The US flipped out about 8 years ago when it was proposed. We don't even discuss precautionary principle in Washington. But that's how you handle these kind of things that you think might happen, among other things. So, you know, who knows if landfills are going to leak or aren't, and that's the problem.
Okay.
We don't know.
Well, on that note, that cheery note, I saved the worst for last. I think our time is up, and I really appreciate the attention of all of you, and I hope you found this interesting and useful, and that we will continue to have the dialogue. Thanks for coming.